Hi, welcome to all. Today we are going to learn about various fixes in physical design. If you are watching my channel for the first time, please help to subscribe. Here is the quick overview of what we are going to learn today. We'll take a look at various methods to fix max delay or setup violations, min delay or hold violations, and design rule violations like max transition and max capacitance, followed by crosstalk noise and delay, IR drop, and electromigration violations. And in the end, we'll take a look at how to fix antenna violations. Okay, let's get started. Fixing max delay or setup violations. We get setup violations in the design whenever a data signal is unable to arrive at the capture flow before the setup time. To know more about setup and hold time basics, please check out my other video from the link above. We typically check setup violations in max corners by considering worst case delays for cells and nets. Before we start fixing setup violations, it is always worth spending some time to perform these sanity checks to make sure we are looking into the correct report. Check your STA run log for any serious errors or warnings because these can affect the quality of results. So please pay special attention to debug these and fix the same. Check the log to see if your timing analysis tool has read in the parasitic information for all the nets in the design. This is to make sure the timing analysis tool can derive the delays for all the nets. Check the validness of the timing path. This is to make sure you are not looking into a false path. Check launch and capture edges. For example, if the data transfer is happening in the same clock domain, you should see same clock being reported in both data arrival and data required time sections. And if it is a cross clock domain, you should see different clocks there. Check the clock period reported is as per your clock constraint. The default setup check is performed after one clock cycle. And let's say if you are performing a non-default setup check, for example, a multi-cycle path, so you should see the check is happening after n number of cycles, that is as per your multi-cycle path constraint. If you are doing OCV or AOCV analysis, double check the D rates that are getting applied are as per your constraints. Check the uncertainty value reported is not too high or too low. Uncertainty typically contains jitter to model the clock edge to edge variation, and it also has some design level margins to account for post silicon variations, for example, based on the previous project statistics for a particular technology. These are some of the sanity checks that we can perform before we actually start fixing. There is one another thing that I want to highlight here is, it is always good to do timing analysis in PBA mode, also called path-based analysis mode, because this is more realistic and reduces the pessimism in comparison to the GBA mode, which is the graph-based analysis mode. Alright, let's look into how to fix max delay violations now. We can fix max delay violations in data path and also in the clock path. So let's discuss how to fix in the data path first. If your violation magnitude is small and if your library supports multiple flavors of threshold voltages, swapping a SVT or HVT cell with a LVT or ULVT type is probably the quickest and the easiest fix. Because this method will not cause any disturbance to the layout. It is highly recommended when you are in the final phase of the design closure. Typically, a cell with lesser threshold voltage has less delay and the better driving capability. Also, the delay variation for a low VT cell across different corners is minimal compared to a high VT cell. Since the physical abstract view used by a PNR implementation tool is identical for a cell with different VT variants, we don't have to do ECO place and route after the swap is done. The only downside of this method is low VT cell will contribute to more leakage power. The next method to fix the max delay violation is by upsizing the cells in data path. A cell with a better drive strength can charge the load capacitance quickly, resulting in lesser propagation delay. Also, the output transition improves, resulting in better delay of preceding stages. But note that increasing the size of the cell results in increased load for the driver cell of its input pins. For example, in some cases, increasing the drive strength of a cell with less load, which is driven by a low drive strength cell, can result in increase in magnitude of the setup violation. So we have to make sure the additional delay caused by upsizing the cell will offset the net RC delay. The downside of this method is, since power dissipation, both leakage and dynamic power and also area are a function of cell drive strength, increasing the drive strength to fix a setup violation results in both area and power increase. Although this is very small in comparison to the whole design. We can improve the transition on the net by adding a repeater to fix the max delay violation. So every logic cell has a limit up to which it can drive a load capacitance. After that, its delay starts increasing rapidly. Since net capacitance is a function of net length, we should keep a limit on the length of the net driven by a gate. Also, the net delay itself is proportional to the square of the net length. Moreover, the transitions may be very bad in such cases, so it is wise to add repeater buffers after a certain distance in order to ensure that the signal is transferred reliably and in time. Let's look at this figure here. So we have a long net which is connecting cell 1 and cell 2. So in this case, we are going to insert a buffer to improve the transition time, which in turn decreases the wire delay. If the amount of wire delay decreased due to better transition is greater than cell delay of the buffer, then overall delay decreases. So in section 1, the net delay is almost same. But in section 2, as we can see from the figure 2, wire delay in section 2 with buffer is less than the wire delay in section 2 without buffer. The overall delay decreases whenever the added buffer cell delay is less than the delta wire delay of section 2. The drawback of this method is, since we are adding a new cell into the design, it increases the area and the power. We have another scenario here to improve the transition on the net. Sometimes when there are many nets at a certain region in the design, the routing tool can detour the nets while trying to get around the congested regions. Thus, two logic cells might be placed very close, but still the delay can seem to be very high for both the cells. For a driver cell, it is due to the high net capacitance, and for a load cell, it is due to the poor transition at its input. Ideally, we would want to make this connection as straight as possible, but due to high net density in the region, router chose to route the way as shown in this figure to help ease the congestion. So after we reroute the same net in this fashion to make it shorter, so this will make the driver cell, cell 1, see a very less load capacitance on its output, and also we'll see a better slew at the input pin of cell 2. Okay, here are some additional tips that can help to improve the timing. It is always better to route the net with less detours as possible. Vias increase the net resistance, so try to have as less vias as possible. Also, replace single cut vias with multi-cut vias to reduce the resistance. Prioritize your timing critical nets and route them in higher metal layers. because higher metal layers usually have less resistance and they help to improve the net delay. We can replace buffers with inverters to improve the data path delay. Adding two inverters instead of a buffer reduces the overall stage delay. Inverter has better driving capability which helps reducing net transition time. For example, if your buffer driving a long net, you might want to replace that with two inverters and spread these inverters along the route so that they can drive the net better. In terms of delay, cell delay of two inverters is not too far off when compared to cell delay of one buffer. We can reduce unnecessary buffering to improve the data path delay. Sometimes buffers are added back to back in a close proximity, so deleting some of them helps fix the violation. But do note that removing a cell reduces the cell delay but increases the net delay. So we have to make sure after removing the buffer, we need to adjust the neighboring buffer positions accordingly. And as long as we make sure that the reduced cell delay is more than the wire delay, then we can see that effective stage delay getting decreased. We can readjust cell positions wherever possible to improve the data path delay. For example, in this case, a buffer is placed very close to the load cell, which is cell 2. And now let's readjust this buffer position in such a way that it is placed in the center of this cell 1 and cell 2. And divide this into three sections to understand more on this. So here the transition time is not so good in section 2 in figure 1 in comparison to transition time in section 3 in figure 2. Meaning the delta wire delay in section 2 is greater than the delta wire delay in section 3. So far we have seen methods to fix in the combinational logic of the data path to fix max delay violations. Now let's touch launch and capture registers to fix the setup violations. We can improve the clock to Q delay of the launching flip-flop to fix the setup violation. So a flip-flop with less clock to Q delay will help meeting a violating setup timing path. And this can be achieved by improving the transition at the flip-flop clock pin and choosing a flip-flop of high drive strength. But note that by doing so, clock transition degrades and the delay can actually increase. So we have to choose the drive strength appropriately. And by replacing the flip-flop with a low VT variant. And we can also fix setup violation by improving the setup time of capturing flip-flop. As we know, the setup time of a flip-flop is a function of the transition at its data and clock pins. Better the transition at data pin, the lesser the setup time. And the worse clock transition causes less setup time. Also, a flip-flop with higher drive strength and with low VT is more probable of having less setup time requirement. Also, increasing the drive strength of flip-flop might cause the transition at clock pin and data pin to get worse due to higher pin loads. This also play a role in deciding the setup time. Okay, these are some of the methods that we can apply in data path to fix max delay. Like I mentioned earlier, we can also modify the clock path to fix max delay violations as well. Okay, here is how we can modify the clock path. We can either pull the launch clock or push the capture clock to meet the max delay requirements. So positive skew helps improve the setup slack. So to fix setup violation, we may either choose to increase the clock latency of the capturing flip-flop, or we can decrease the clock latency of the launching flip-flop. However, in doing so, we need to be careful regarding setup and hold slack of other timing paths that are being formed from and to these flip-flops. Okay, these are some of the methods that we can apply for fixing the max delay. Fixing min delay violations. We get hold violations in the design whenever a data signal is unable to stay stable for t hold time after the clock edge. Fixing hold violations is so crucial because a hold failure at silicon is very risky. But setup failures can still be managed by reducing the operating frequency. We check min delay in min corners by considering best case delays for cells and nets. Like we discussed for max delay earlier, we can perform similar sanity checks here as well before we can actually start fixing violations. Once these checks are verified fine, we can proceed further for fixing. Here is the first and the easiest method to fix min delay violation. This method is just the opposite to what we have done for fixing max delay. We can replace a low VT cell with a high VT variant to increase the data path delay and thus fixing the violation. This method is so effective because, as we discussed earlier, swapping doesn't disturb the layout and we don't have to do ECO place and route after the swap is done. Only thing to note here is we need to check the setup margin through this cell before performing the swap. We can downsize cells in the data path to fix the violation. This method is just the opposite to what we have done for fixing max delay. If the violation magnitude is small, replacing a cell with a similar cell of less drive strength will add delay to the data path and help fix the violation. Again, the thing to note here is we need to check the setup margin through this cell before we perform the sizing. We can increase the wire length to fix min delay violations. Slight changes to the routing of the net help reduce the hold violation. This is done by either lengthening or detouring of the wire routes or by hopping it into the more resistive layers, typically the lower metal layers. And this is an effective method to fix hold violations if your violation magnitude is small and you don't want to add new cells into the design. This way we can save some area and power as well. So here detour routing is helping us by introducing large cap on the net to the driving cell, which causes additional net delay and thereby increasing the data path delay. Inserting buffers to fix min delay violations. We can add some delay to the data path by inserting buffers to fix min delay violations. It's always better to choose low drive strength buffer cells which will provide large delay. So this way we will end up adding less number of buffers into the design. To fix smaller magnitude of hold violations, low drive strength buffer cells are efficient to use because they would consume less area and power and also helps in improving the QR of the design. Let's say if the magnitude of the violation is huge, inserting delay cells is the efficient method to fix min delay violations. Delay cells have the same functionality as that of a buffer but with larger delay, larger area and high power. To fix larger magnitude of hold violations, delay cells are very efficient to use, which would consume less area and power and also helps in improving the QR, which would otherwise be fixed by the usage of many buffers. Also, it is not practically possible to insert a chain of say 20 to 30 buffers in a highly congested region. In such scenarios, delay cells can do the job easily for the same delay requirements. So far we have been seeing fixing in the combinational logic of the data path. Now let's see how to fix min delay violations by touching launch and capture registers. Increase the clock to queue delay of the launching flip-flop will help in meeting the min delay requirement. So here a launching flip-flop with more clock to queue delay will help ease the hold timing of the data path. For this, either we can decrease the drive strength of the flip-flop or we can move it to a higher threshold voltage. Or we can fix the min delay violation by improving the hold time of the capturing flip-flop. Using a capturing flip-flop with higher drive strength or a lower VT variant will give a lower hold time requirement. Also, degrading the transition at the flip-flop's clock pin reduces its hold time requirement. Okay, these are some of the ways that we can use in the data path to fix min delay violation. Now let us see how we can modify the clock path to achieve the same. So we can push the launch clock or pull the capture clock to fix the min delay violation. Again, this is just the opposite to what we have done for fixing max delay. As we saw earlier, a positive skew helps meeting the setup timing. So here we use the negative skew approach to fix the violation. So we can either decrease the latency of the capturing flip-flop or we can increase the clock latency of launching flip-flop to fix the min violation. So one thing to note here is we need to check for setup and hold slacks of other timing paths starting and or ending at these flip-flops to ensure we don't violate other paths. Alright, these are some of the techniques that we can use to fix min delay violations. Please note that the setup and hold checks or max delays or min delays that we have discussed so far are associated with synchronous data signals for a flop and they are applied to both rise and fall transitions of the data. So similarly, we also have recovery and removal checks on the other hand. They are for asynchronous reset transitioning from active state to inactive state only. They are mainly associated with respect to the reset assertion and deassertion and they are not covered in this video. Fixing max transition violations. Okay, before we look into the fixes, let me give you a brief background of what max transition and the details about that. When a signal takes too long transitioning from one logic level to another, a transition violation is reported. And this is a function of the node resistance and the capacitance. It is highly recommended to fix DRVs in the earlier stages of the design cycle so that they can have proper feedbacks for timing and congestion issues. The transition is decided by two factors. One is the input slew and the other one is the output load, including the wire cap and the fan out. As we know, each cell in the cell library is provided with a lookup table representative of the characterized characteristics. This kind of representation is a discrete representation. The value corresponding to any input slew and output load is calculated by the tool by interpolating between these points. The delay calculated is accurate for small deviations from these values. However, once the transition and the load go out of this range, the tool has to extrapolate the delays from these points, which is less accurate than interpolating since there is now only one bounding value. This inaccuracy increases further once the operating point shifts away from the extreme values given in the lookup table. And beyond this point, the actual silicon results and the delays predicted by tools will not match. Moreover, the delays predicted by different tools over extrapolation differ by a great amount since different tools use different algorithms for delay calculation. Hence, extrapolation should be avoided at all costs. Please note that max-tran constraints for data and clock signals are different and they vary based on the frequency and the methodology that we use for timing sign-off. For example, we over-constrain above the library limits and it could be based on the previous project statistics for a particular technology. Usually we get max-tran violations when a weak driver is driving a long net or when a cell is driving large load against its characterized limit. Typically, max-tran violations are reported on the load pins So it is always good to trace and extract the unique driver pins and the nets information, and that way it makes the debug easier. We check max transition in max corners, that's where we will have worst slews. The first and easiest method to fix max tran violation is by swapping a high VT cell with a low channel or low VT cell. This is very effective method if your violation magnitude is small. Let's say once you find the driver for the load pin which is violating the max transition, we can perform the swap. So if the driver is HVT, we can swap with SVT, or if it is SVT, we can swap it with LVT, provided the cell has sufficient hole slack across modes and corners. As we know that on current through the transistor is proportional to V minus VT, hence by lowering the VT, current increases, which will give a better output transition. By swapping the VT of driver cells, timing and congestion should not be impacted much. Hence this is the easiest way. As we saw earlier, swapping a cell doesn't need a ECO place and route. So it creates basically no disturbance to the layout. If the violation is not fixed with cell swap, we can upsize the driver cell to fix the max tran violation. Since the current is directly proportional to the W by L ratio, by increasing the width, it will enhance the output transition and better output load driving capability. Drive strength should increase in accordance with the violation. So choose proper drive strength for the driver accordingly to fix the DRV violation. If the magnitude of the violation is small, then choose to increase the drive strength by a small factor. Let's say if the violation is not fixed by either cell sizing or swapping, we can split the fan out by cloning method to fix the violation. So as we can see here, a buffer is driving a load of 4. So now we are going to split that into half and we are going to clone the buffer here. So each buffer is now driving only 2 cells. This way we can improve the transition on the load pins, and hence we can fix the max tran violation. We can fix max transition by splitting fan out by buffering. This works pretty well even if your violation magnitude is large. So in this example, we are splitting the load into half and inserting 2 buffers here, so that each buffer now driving half of the load. So load splitting we can use in various scenarios. For example, if the driver has only one fan out, then the solution is pretty simple. We just have to add a repeater buffer at a strategic location on the net so as to distribute the net load between the driver and the newly inserted buffer. The sizes of the current driver and newly inserted buffer have to be decided keeping in mind the load seen by each of these after the new connections are made. For example, on the other hand, if the driver of the failing net has more than one fan out, then the process is more complicated. So in that case, we can add a buffer strategically after the driver so that the loads are equally distributed between these 2 cells. Yeah, these are some of the methods we can use to fix max tran violations. And let's say if all the violations are not fixed by using the methods that we just discussed, we should investigate further to find the main reason behind it. Possible reasons could be congestion or timing impact due to fixing the max trans. If congestion is the main reason, we should try to distribute the less timing critical logic to other regions. After that, we should redistribute the cells in other regions with timing iterations so that the congestion of that particular area is gone and we can fix the violation there. And if the timing is affected by the VT swap or cell sizing or buffer insertion, we should backtrace the timing path manually and find out a particular node where the slew can be improved and its positive effect is propagated to the culprit cell and improve the input transition of that cell. But we should always remember to check the timing slack after every change at any stage. Fixing max capacitance violations. The capacitance on a node is a combination of the fan out of the output pin and the capacitance of the net. Max cap check ensures that the cell does not drive more capacitance than the cell is characterized for. So max cap value is basically the maximum load value a cell is supposed to drive as output. Whenever this value is exceeded the max cap limit, tool flags it as a violation. We check max cap in max corners, and these are some of the methods we can use to fix max cap violations. If the violation magnitude is small, we can just upsize the driver cell so that it can drive more load. And if the violation is slightly larger, we can split the fan out by cloning method so that it will reduce the loading on the driver cell. Or we can also split the fan out by inserting buffers at the right locations and to reduce the loading on the driver cell so that the cap is reduced on the driver. Fixing crosstalk violations. Crosstalk is one of the biggest signal integrity problem in the lower node technologies. It has mainly two effects on the design: crosstalk noise and crosstalk delay. Crosstalk noise can potentially change the functionality of the design, and on the other hand, crosstalk delay can introduce timing problems in the design. So fixing crosstalk is very important. Since I have already made a video on crosstalk details, I am not going into much details here, but I will quickly run through the fixes next to cover this topic here. Please check out my video on crosstalk from the above link. We check noise in min corners, and these are some of the sanity checks that we should perform before we start fixing the crosstalk violations. Check run logs for any serious errors or warnings. If you have any of these, please try to fix them first. Check if the coupling capacitance is extracted in the SPEF, and review your parasitic annotation summary file to make sure all the nets are annotated, and also make sure your analysis tool is reading in the coupling capacitance for all the nets. And finally, review crosstalk related settings. For example, the noise threshold settings that you have set for noise bump, height and width, aggressor to victim ratios, and check if your analysis tool is reporting the noise at the source or at the endpoint. Okay, now let's look into the fixes. We can fix crosstalk by reducing the coupling capacitance using the track reassignment method. This is done by moving away the aggressor nets from the victim net. As long as you are moving the aggressor nets into a safe region, this is a very effective method to fix the crosstalk. We can also fix the crosstalk by breaking the long victim net. For example, if your victim net and aggressor are running on the adjacent tracks and are on the same layer, you can probably switch the victim net layer to another layer to reduce the crosstalk. Do remember that actually crosstalk may occur to a victim net from the same metal layer or from the other metal layer as well, but the effect from the other layer is lesser as compared to the same metal layer because the distancing between them and the routing direction of metal nets. So the most dominating contribution is always from the same layer. We can also fix crosstalk by upsizing the victim net driver and also by downsizing the aggressor net driver. So this is very effective again because here we are only doing a cell resizing. So here only the replacement of cells has a localized effect on the layout, and it will require only the reconnection of the signals to the equivalent pins. We can apply NDR rules to fix crosstalk as well, mainly with double spacing. And we can shield the victim net with ground net so that the extra voltage that is coupled from the aggressor can be discharged through this ground net. If you have routing resources in your design, you could probably go with this shielding approach. And finally, we can fix crosstalk by adding a buffer at the right location on the victim net. And take note that Adding a buffer can be difficult sometimes because its addition can introduce additional delay and may result in timing violations. And buffer insertion can also increase the power consumption. But let's say if your design has a lot of crosstalk violations in the first place, you might want to go with this approach. But do note that we need to take into the effects of timing and power before we add the buffer. Fixing IR drop violations. As we move towards lower geometries, we started to see power grid integrity issues in the designs for two primary reasons. The first one is deep submicron geometries require low power supply voltages, which reduce the chip's tolerance of noise, which is the noise margin. And the second one is smaller geometries result in many more transistors per die. More transistors not only consume more power but also strain the chip's internal power distribution network by causing the dynamic voltage drop. Power noise, IR drop, all these refer to the issue of measurable decreases in supply voltage from the chip's voltage supply pins to its internal areas. The supply voltage at the pins may be ideal, but line resistance, inductance effects, and capacitive parasitics result in voltage drop, leading to delay and slew rate changes that ultimately cause setup and hold violations. Setup violations will reduce the chip speed, and hold violations can have more severe consequences and cause the chip to fail. So it's always better to work on a design flow that can analyze the dynamic voltage drop early and accurately. These are some of the sanity checks that we should perform before we fix the violations. As always, check run logs for any serious errors or warnings and try to fix them first. And check voltage source locations. Let's say if you are working at a block level, make sure the locations that you have defined are aligned with the next level where your block is integrated. And if you are working at the chip level, you can make sure the bump locations or the pad locations are correct. And review the load capacitance that is set on the output ports. And you should always review the max frequency of the design that is set for the IR drop analysis. And check toggle rates for signal nets and clock nets. And also review the switching activity annotation summary if you are doing a dynamic voltage drop analysis using a vectored approach. So it is always good to get a VCD file which covers most of the high switching nets in the design. Okay, now let's look into the fixes. We can fix IR drop by spreading the cells. Let's say if we have some logic which is placed in a small region with high density, it causes high current demand, and all the cells in that region may not get the sufficient voltage. So spreading cells there will help fix the violation. And we can downsize cells to reduce the IR drop. So it basically reduces the instantaneous current demand with a possible impact on setup timing though. Some cells with high drive strength create dynamic IR drop issue. So you can give cell padding to these cells to fix the IR drop as well. So we can split the output load capacitance also to fix the violation, because the amount of current drawn from the PZ grid is directly proportional to the output cap that is being driven. So splitting helps in reducing the peak demand and also improve timing in most of the cases. We can add PZ stripes. Let's say if you have some free tracks, you can add some more PZ stripes to reduce the resistance and also to improve the IR drop. We can build a robust PG grid with higher metal layers as much as possible, because higher metal layers have less resistance and it will improve the current conductivity in the PG grid. We can use multi-cut vias or stacked vias to reduce the resistance further. We can use cell padding technique as well. So to reduce the peak current demand from the PZ grade. When it comes to air drop issues, clock structure is the primary culprit for the power consumption of the chip due to the high clock switching. However, by padding clock cells, cells in the clock network are given extra area as keep out regions to avoid placement of standard cells and any excessive cell density around them. This helps to prevent the dynamic air drop. And we can insert decap cells to reduce the air drop. So basically decaps acts as charge reservoirs that can supply current to standard cells during the high demand, especially when there is a simultaneous switching of cells in a local region. But do note that decap cells tend to dissipate more leakage power. Fixing electromigration violations. Electromigration decreases the reliability of chips. Its effects are becoming the biggest concern for signal integrity. While EM has been a problem since 90 nanometer or even earlier, it is getting worse at advanced nodes such as 20 nanometer and below. That's because wires are getting thinner and current densities are higher. As we scale the wires down to more advanced process nodes, resistance increases and more current is needed. Similarly, to get the performance that we need from the devices, we may need to increase the current density. So the probability of failure due to the electromigration is increasing because both the power density and the current density are increasing. Okay, so as always, we need to do some sanity checks before we fix the violations. And the sanity checks are pretty much similar to what we have seen for air drop. So here voltage source locations are not relevant for signal EM checks. However, as you can see here, the other checks are still valid. So we can try to fix them if any issues there. Now let us see how to fix EM violations. We can downsize the driver cell to fix EM violations. So basically downsizing the driver cell will reduce the current density in the interconnects and reduces the risk of EM failure. But we have to make sure that downsizing the driver will not affect the timing or transition time in the path. And we can apply NDR on the victim net to fix the violation. So applying NDR will increase the metal width, which will in turn increase its current carrying capability. So safest way is to apply NDR on the whole net. But let's say if your design is too congested, then applying NDR on the whole net may result in high number of shorts or even detouring of that net, which will affect the timing. So if applying a NDR on the whole victim net is not possible, then we can rather increase the wire width of that particular segment. So in this way, we can apply NDR on only those segments which are failing EM and which are having high RMS value. So the wider the wire, the smaller the current density and the greater resistance to the electromigration. We can also insert buffers to fix the violations. Inserting a buffer or a pair of inverters will break the long net and reduces the resistance. We have to make sure that the EM affected path has enough timing margin so that adding a buffer won't degrade the timing. And we can route on higher layers to fix the violation as well. Higher routing layers are less resistive and have higher current carrying capabilities, making nets less prone to the electromigration. Though we have to make sure that before routing on higher layer, the routing congestion of those higher layers should be less, or else it will again result in shorts and detouring of the nets. We can replace single cut vias with multi-cut vias so that we can fix the electromigration. Electromigration is more dominant on vias as there is sudden change in area through which current is flowing. Usage of multi-cut via will increase the via area, reduces the resistance, and also increases the reliability of the wire. NDR vias are usually larger in size with larger contact area, and they help fix the violation further. And we can break the fan out to fix the EM violation as well. High fan out causes a high current to be drawn from the driver. So this can be avoided by splitting the fan out using buffers. Generally the buffer we added should be of same size or one size lower than the driver so that timing is not much affected. Restrict the usage of high drive cells. This is an automatic fix that is done by the PNR tool. So during PNR, we can set the high drive cells as don't use. So by setting them don't use, we'll avoid the usage of these cells during the implementation and will help to fix EM violations. Apart from these methods, we can use one another method to fix EM violations as well. So usually fixing hold timing prior to EM fixing at sign off considerably reduces the EM violating nets, because hold fixing will add buffers that will ultimately break the nets. Fixing antenna violations. Antenna rules are used in SOC design to check for excessive accumulation of charge on metal during the fabrication. The antenna effect, also called plasma-induced gate oxide damage effect, is an effect that can potentially cause yield and reliability problems during the manufacturing of integrated circuits. Foundries typically supply antenna rules that must be obeyed to avoid this problem, and violation of such rules results in antenna violations. Typically, antenna rules are expressed as an allowable ratio of metal to gate area, and we have these ratios defined for all interconnect layers and also for oxide layers in the technology file. Now let us see how to fix antenna violations. Layer hopping method. As we can see here in this picture, we have a long M1 interconnect. During fabrication process, any accumulated excessive charge can potentially damage the gate oxide. So in order to fix this violation, we are going to break this net and taking it to a higher metal layer, which is M2, to fix the violation. And it is always better to do this edit at the load pin as much as possible in order to fix the violation effectively. So this metal jumping is breaking the long interconnect, and hence the charge collected on the long interconnect will not discharge through the gate oxide because the higher metal layer is not fabricated yet. If you see the first picture again, so during the fabrication, as we know, the lower layers are formed first. So now M1 is broken. There is no discharge path for the accumulated charge to pass through here. Once M1 is formed, then M2 is deposited next. We can also insert diode to fix the antenna violation. And again, to effectively fix the violation, it is always better to add the diode at the load pin as much as possible. And make sure the diode is connected in the reverse bias mode. We can reduce the via area to fix the violation as well. Usually large via area causes antenna violations. So converting multi-cut vias to double cut vias or even double cut vias to single cut vias reduces the via cut area and help to fix the violation. But do note that this method would probably introduce issues such as electromigration. So use this method with caution. And finally, we can add a dummy load to fix the violation. As we know, antenna rule is the ratio of metal area to gate area. So increasing gate area will reduce the antenna ratio. And gate area can be increased by adding a dummy load, usually a inverter or buffer, and connecting the gate of that particular dummy cell to the gate of the cell with high antenna ratio. And here we need to keep the output of dummy cell floating. That's all I have for fixes in physical design. If you have any questions or suggestions on this topic, please help to leave your feedback in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video to be useful. If you like the video, please help to share and subscribe for more videos. See you next time. Bye.